Welcome to the Fulfilling the Mission podcast. I'm Brandon Isle with BYU-Idaho Radio. The mission of BYU-Idaho is to develop disciples of Jesus Christ who are leaders in their home, in their communities, and in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. In this podcast, we're exploring how each of our academic departments and colleges are helping to fulfill the mission of BYU-Idaho. And we're in the Welcome Center today, here in the Manwaring Center, and joining me are Scott Johnson, who's the chair of the Department of Chemistry and Biochemistry, and James Edwards, a student majoring in biochemistry. Thanks for joining us here today.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely.
It's so exciting to talk about each of these departments because our students are learning so many cool things. And I think when you're a student, you kind of get locked into your own major, and we're exploring so many different majors. It's fun to have you here today.
That's cool.
First, I wanted to talk a little bit about your background.
Sure.
Scott,
Yeah.
I know you have degrees in biochemistry.
In organic chemistry.
In organic
Yes.
chemistry, that's right, from BYU and from MIT.
Right.
Tell me why you're so interested in this field.
I've always loved science, even since I was just a young boy. And so I thought I wanted to be a physician. I was preparing to be a physician, went on my mission, came home, had no desire to be a physician anymore. So I knew I liked chemistry. So I signed up for an organic chemistry class. It was the best class I've ever had in my life. I loved it, fell in love with it. I had a professor that took an interest in me, let me do research with him, and that just led to a desire to do this for the rest of my life.
Yeah, that's so cool. And you worked in industry, and then
Yes.
you came to BYU-Idaho
Yes.
in 2017.
Right.
What facilitated the move to education?
Yeah, I was working for a company called Georgia Pacific. I worked for them for over 20 years, and they made some changes in the organization, and I got laid off. And so I was looking for another position in the chemical industry, but I also knew that I wanted to teach. I've always had a desire to teach. And so I started looking for opportunities at universities to teach. I got an opportunity to come here to BYU-Idaho, and I loved it. It was just a great opportunity. I especially enjoyed the chance I had to interact with the students. I loved that. And so I got the opportunity to come here, and it's been a great thing, a great opportunity for me and my family. Just one thing I wanted to add about that is, when I first came here and people would ask me how I wound up here, it was embarrassing for me to talk about being laid off, and then that's the reason that facilitated the change. But since then, I've come to the realization, or the Lord's taught me, that that's a good thing for the students to hear. Those things happen in life, right? Mm-hmm. And I really believe that through that, God gave me the opportunity to come here, and it's been a great blessing for me and my family.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Now, James, tell me a little bit about yourself. You're from Layton, Utah.
That's right.
And I assume you've loved science and things like that?
Yes, that's true. I also kind of always enjoyed sciencey stuff, right? Since I was a little kid. And my parents kind of facilitated my curiosity, I guess. And, I read lots of sciencey books and stuff and all of that. And I originally was actually thinking of being a physicist. That was what my kind of initial plan A was. So I started school at Weber State University in Ogden, Utah. I did that for about a year and a half as a physics major. But I realized that it wasn't quite the right fit for me. It's very theoretically based, and you do a lot of math, and it's very interesting, right? But I kind of was wanting something more applied and something that I could see a little bit better, and I kind of began exploring other options a little bit because I was just becoming a little bit like maybe this isn't the right path for me. And I was praying about it too, and kind of thinking about it, and I looked at the biochemistry program at Weber State, and it looked pretty good, but I always had kind of had an intuition and maybe had gotten some promptings that I might want to come to school here. And so I thought about it for a little while, and I finally decided upon it. So I did my first 2 semesters as a biochem major at Weber State, and then I transferred up here in the fall of 2022. And I've been here doing biochemistry since then. So
yeah, that's so awesome. It's amazing how the Lord can just bring people. I mean, you both had this experience.
Right.
The Lord prompting you, helping you, bringing you to BYU-Idaho.
Yeah, definitely.
That's right.
Yeah, for sure.
Let's talk a little bit about the programs that the department offers. I know there are 3 majors. Can you just kind of walk us through each of those?
So we have 3 majors. You can major in chemistry. You can get a bachelor's degree in chemistry. You can get a bachelor's degree in biochemistry and a bachelor's degree in chemical education. So those are the 3 majors that we have.
Yeah, and what's the difference, especially like biochemistry and chemistry? For someone like me who hasn't delved into this world, what does that entail?
So if you want to major in biochemistry, you're going to take the standard chemistry classes, but you're also going to get a background in biology. So you'll take some biology courses that help you get a feel for not just chemistry, but you got a feel from the biological side as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So have you taken a bunch of these classes to this point?
Yeah, this is my last semester actually.
Okay.
So
very close. You're
very
almost done.
close. Yeah, it's so close. Yeah, that's right. So it's just like you said, right? Yeah, I've taken a year of biology, just like the regular introductory biology series, and then extra microbiology class. And then you take an extra biochemistry class and a biochemistry lab that chemistry majors don't have to take. So it's true, right? I kind of sometimes feel like I walk away from it. And I'm walking away from it, especially because of the research I've chosen, maybe a little bit more chemist than biologist. I kind of, you have a lot of research avenues open to you in your, in the department, right? And I've kind of chosen to do more analytical chemistry-based research. But my wife, who is the same major as I am, she just graduated, and she did a lot more with the biology aspect of it. So it's very interesting. And one of the reasons I chose it actually, as opposed to just doing a chemistry major, is because it's very versatile, right? It prepares you to work in fields that are biologically based and chemistry based, right? And so because it kind of sits in this interesting median kind of between the two, it's also, in my opinion, where the most interesting stuff is. But, certain of my friends might disagree with me, right? But
long discussions, I'm sure.
So our biochemistry majors, they have this emphasis in biology, and the chemistry majors take some additional courses that the biochemists don't take. So they get a chance to explore some other areas as well.
So as they begin, they're kind of on parallel paths, and then at some point there's a
That's a good way to say it. Yeah, that's right.
That's so fun. You mentioned research a lot, and I know this is big for your department. I'll have each of you first just tell me kind of what you're looking for students to do, and then if you'd share, James, what you've done for your research.
Right. So chemistry is such a hands-on science. There's so much that you do in the lab, right? When you're doing chemical research. And so our students take laboratory classes all along the program. As they're working through the program, they're taking a lot of laboratory courses. But we want them to get additional experience beyond that. And so we have internships built into the program where they have a very detailed chance to get into research. We also have a number of the members of our faculty that have small research teams that are made up of students, and it's focused on giving students more experience in the lab, more hands-on experience.
Yeah. So is that required for each student to?
An internship is, but a research is not. It's an extracurricular opportunity for the students to grow.
Yeah. And I imagine a lot of them take advantage of that.
Yes.
Tell us about your research.
Yeah. So what we do, I work with Dr. David Collins, and we do research for Young Living essential oils, right? Okay. So, you can buy, a whole variety of good smelling oils, right? What our research focuses on, though, is a substance that's usually a byproduct of making the oil. So when you distill the oil, right, you essentially take whatever plant you're trying to distill and you put it in a big vat and you boil water under it, you get steam going over it, and the steam leaches out the organic chemicals that eventually make up the oil. And the steam and the oil together kind of go through a pipe basically, and they get condensed. And when they condense, you get this skiff of oil on top of a bunch of water, right? So our research looks at the properties of the water that's left over. because it still retains some of the substances that give the plant its fragrance. And some of them are a little bit different from the scent of the oil. It's kind of interesting because some of it is kind of proprietary, and so I probably can't talk tons about
like,
all
where's
of
the
it.
line?
Yeah, right. Like I don't want to like say stuff I shouldn't do, but essentially we look at concentrating that byproduct and examining some of its chemical properties, like what makes it different from the oil, chemically speaking, and what makes it similar to the oil, chemically speaking. So that's kind of the gist of it, I guess.
Yeah.
In a nutshell.
So you're working closely with your professor doing this research.
That's right.
How is that preparing you for graduation?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. This type of experience, so most of the analytical part of the analytical chemistry, we work with an instrument called a gas chromatograph mass spectrometer. And that, yes, there's many syllables, right? But what we're doing is we're trying to, so we want to know, we have this stuff, right? We want to know what's in it. And we use this instrument to separate and identify the compounds in it. And having experience doing, using GCMS is the acronym, as well as looking at the data that's generated from that, is very valuable in a lot of industries. GCMS is kind of a very it's kind of like bread and butter, right? You kind of everybody uses it. A lot of people use it. It depends on the application. It varies, of course, but it's very common, and having experience doing that kind of stuff is very valuable.
One thing I'd add is when you're applying for a job or you're applying to graduate school, if you're applying and they're comparing you against other chemistry majors, all the chemistry majors from all over the country are taking the same type of courses. And so it's experiences like the one James describes that helps you differentiate yourself, right? You've had some additional experience in the lab, so you've got some extra experience that you can talk about and that you can feature as you apply for a job or for graduate school.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Have you started applying already, or are you going to graduate school? What are your...
It's a good question. How do I shorten the story of my life? I'm going to be applying for jobs very shortly. I'm kind of still finishing up some of my research hours that I'm using for my internship in the next couple weeks, and I'm going to start putting out applications. I actually have also kind of arrived at a conclusion that I want to take a little bit of a less traditional career path. In theory, we'll see what happens, right? What happens remains in the future. And so I'm going to be applying to jobs in laboratories and things. But I think I'd like to teach. I'd like to teach high school science. I mentioned before we started filming that I guess maybe I talked about it at the beginning too, that I was a physics major. When I was doing that, I also took some astronomy classes. I took some geology classes. I've taken a lot of classes in a lot of different subjects. And I've discovered that as I've specialized into one area of research, I kind of enjoy looking at the broader picture of science a little bit more, actually. And I've even discovered that I enjoy talking to people about my research, sometimes even more than I enjoy doing it, right? Because you're sitting there in the lab, you're crunching data again, and it's like another day of looking at numbers, and it's all very fascinating. But the joy I get in it is communicating it with other people and telling people the story, right? And I felt kind of, and again, as I've thought about it and as I prayed about it, I felt that that's a route that I'd like to go. So I'm also looking into how do I kind of transition from doing a pure science major to doing teaching? And it's a little bit of a process, but I'm starting the process. So that's kind of my initial plan right now. But if not, the nice thing about a degree in biochemistry, again, is that there's a lot of different sectors you can work in. There's a lot of different types of jobs you can have. And I would enjoy doing most of them, right? Almost any of them have interesting elements to them. Elements. But so
that's
so it
a science
kind of
joke, right?
Yes, no pun intended. So that's kind of, I don't know, maybe that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you.
In a roundabout way.
Yeah, so Scott, tell me about this process. The students are going through these classes and they get to the point where they need an internship, and then obviously they're graduating and hoping to go into industry. Are there certain companies that are recruiting students here to be interns or to work for them full time?
Right. So we have connections with a number of companies that have hired students throughout the years. So if you look at our students when they graduate, we have about a third of our students that go into industry. We have about a third of our students that go to graduate school. And we have about a third of our majors that go to professional schools. They go to medical school or dental school. And so when they're looking for an internship, the internships usually come from a company, like Young Living, for example, or they come at a university. So some of the universities that our students have gone to for internships, BYU, University of Utah, Utah State, Montana State, we've sent interns to all of those places.
Yeah. And so they get to go to these places and they probably try to recruit them to continue
Exactly.
their education there.
That's right. So an internship can oftentimes wind up as an opportunity to go to and work at that company or to be a graduate student at that school, right?
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's just so fascinating. Tell me about the classroom. You mentioned there's a lot of lab work.
Yes.
What kind of stuff, when I think about chemistry and science, I'm like, what can I put together to make an explosion? Right, that's the first thing I'm thinking of. But I'm sure it's a lot more
Most of
than
the time
that.
we're trying to avoid the
explosions.
explosions.
Theory, yes.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So what can students expect in those labs and classrooms?
Okay. James, do you want to go?
I guess I can,
Yeah.
and you can fill in the gaps that I leave
Sure.
unfilled if you want. So as a first-time student kind of walking into this, right, and I think if you are considering doing it as a major or something like that, right, the best place you could start with something like that would probably be taking just like introductory general chemistry, right, 105 and 106. It's interesting because the environment of BYU-Idaho, right, as you know, the people who go here know, right, is very different than kind of your typical public university. Something that, you know, a lot of people talk about it, right, but I'm going to talk about it anyway, is this sort of spiritual atmosphere that prevails at BYU-Idaho. And that's one reason that I really thought about coming here as opposed to just, you know, a regular state school. I mean, I love Weber State, don't get me wrong. It's a great place. But there's a very unique atmosphere here, right? A lot of classes, right? Most of my professors start their classes with prayer. And when I first transferred up here, I was like, we're praying in chemistry class? Like, what are we doing, right? Like, it's so awesome. Like, as I've gone on, I've kind of realized that like the act of inviting the Lord to help teach you is perhaps the most important thing you can do when you're learning chemistry or anything for that matter, right? But it's, you know, I assume it wouldn't be that much different than most other classes you take. Obviously, the content can definitely be rigorous at times, right? It can definitely be difficult at times. And when you are majoring, you know, in a field like this, you will often face setbacks and you will often face failure, and you will have to try again, right?
That's the point, right?
And that's how it goes, right?
Yeah, learn how to do that well, right?
Exactly.
That's important.
You kind of have to, right? And you learn that even though it's hard, it's still really good. And it's okay to do it even though it's hard because it's interesting. And you peel apart layers of complexity about the universe, right? Why does the world do what it does? Why do our bodies work the way that they do, right? How do all the food and medicines and clothing and things that we use, how does it all work? Where does it come from, right? How do you make it? And then turning that towards like the future, how do we improve things, right? How do we make more medicine? How do we cure disease? How do we come up with innovative new products, right? These are the types of questions that you begin to ask, and you begin to gain the skills of learning how to answer those kinds of questions by taking a course of study like this.
Yeah.
Our program is set up so that as a student goes through the program, they're exposed to all of these different subsections of chemistry. Right. So you learn, James mentioned biochemistry, he mentioned analytical chemistry, but you also get exposed to organic chemistry and physical chemistry and inorganic chemistry, so that as a student goes through the program, they get a chance to be exposed to all the different disciplines within chemistry so that they can make an informed choice of which direction they want to go once they once they finish.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to add something to what James mentioned about the classroom. In the classroom, one of my favorite things about teaching here at BYU-Idaho is I get to talk about two of my very favorite things, organic chemistry and the gospel of Jesus Christ. And I'm so glad I get to talk about both of them. Both of them have been such a great blessing to my life.
Yeah. Well, it works just hand in hand, right? Where you're learning about life, really, and how it works together, and what's life without the Spirit.
Yeah, you're trying to learn truth, And I've learned a lot of beautiful things in the laboratory, and I've learned a lot of beautiful things through inspiration and revelation.
Yeah. Can you give me an example of something that's helped you?
You mean
Yeah.
in either area?
Yeah, either area. Yeah.
Yeah, so for example, in organic chemistry, one of the things that we study is how you put molecules together, right? How you build molecules and how you control that process so you can build precisely what you want. If you think about it, if you think about the periodic table, all the elements, it's the ultimate Lego set, right? You build everything from these things, these elements.
So true.
And that's what you do in organic chemistry, you learn to build. And one of the things that you learn through being an organic chemist is you come to admire the way the Lord, what a great chemist he is, right? And when you think about biochemistry and the things that happen in biochemical processes, the chemistry is absolutely amazing.
Yeah. How BYU-Idaho is all about creating disciple leaders. And
Right.
how do you make sure, as the department chair, to have the teachers bring that into the classroom?
So we've talked a lot about this over the past year and a half as a faculty, is how do we do that? How do we build disciples? Because there are so many places you can go and get a good, sound chemical education. But here at BYU-Idaho, it gives us the opportunity. If you want to come here, you can come here and get a very good education in chemistry. But we also are here to help you become a disciple of Jesus Christ. And so we've talked about how do we do that. And my colleagues do a great job of helping the students in that way. James mentioned the professor that he works for. He's a great example of somebody who is an excellent scientist. But you can also see that he's a disciple of Jesus Christ by the way that he treats his students, right? And the interactions that he has. I have another colleague that shares some of the mistakes that he makes in his life and when he's doing things at home, because he wants students to understand that that's what life's all about, right? It's experiential, and you learn from both the things that go well and the things that go wrong. And the important thing is to be committed even through those difficult times or those challenges that you face. I have another colleague that when she sees things that she loves, say from General Conference or other things that have inspired her, she'll post them on her Canvas site, right? So her students can benefit from these things that are inspiring to her. So just a lot of good things coming on. I had another colleague talk to me about having a difficult conversation with a student that was being disruptive in class, but sitting down and talking with that student and helping that student understand what was going on in class. And I love that that was done on a one-on-one basis. It reminds me of the way the Savior, taught people and helped people.
Yeah, thank you so much. My last question for each of you is, how does let me try that again. How does the Department of Chemistry and Biochemistry fulfill the mission of BYU-Idaho? We'll start with TJ.
Yeah. Well, so I think that maybe I'll just put in my sort of, testament of this idea of becoming a disciple leader, right? Because during my time here, I've definitely grown intellectually, right? But just like Brother Johnson was saying, right, I've also grown spiritually, and that is due in part because of the efforts of Brother Johnson and the chemistry faculty here. They're very good at helping me remember what is most important and helping me remember Jesus Christ. And as I have in my life tried to remember him better in the things that I do, in the decisions that I make, my choices, I have come to know him better as well during my time here. And that has been the greatest of blessings. And so I guess maybe in a small way, that mission is fulfilled. And these are things that I'm going to take with me when I leave, right? This is my last semester here, but it's kind of the beginning for me. And so I'm going to remember those things too.
Yeah, thank you.
I think one of the great things about BYU-Idaho are the class sizes. And the class sizes are good for the students, but they're also so good for us as the professors, because we have small enough class sizes that we get to know the individual students. And that's a great blessing. And when you get to know the students individually, then I think the students can sense that you care about them and that they are loved as children of God and as disciples of Jesus Christ. And I think that's so important. I think if people feel loved, miraculous things happen.
Scott Johnson, James Edwards, thank you for joining me on the Fulfilling the Mission podcast.
You're welcome. Thank you.